You're wrapping up how many years of pastoring?
Like 12 and a half.
12 and a half.
You can say 12
years.
Yeah.
Split between youth pastor and executive pastor.
Executive pastor, though I feel like I never really left the youth ministry world.
What would you define an executive pastor as?
Oh, man. Executive pastor is someone who is overlooking the organizational function of the church.
Okay.
I think in many ways, like the staff implementing the vision or mission, making sure things are getting done, kind of thing.
Okay.
So
very different than youth pastor.
Yeah, very
or
different.
Similar in some ways.
I mean, I think very different, but
okay.
Similar in the ways that a youth pastor overlooks the whole function of a set program and organization. You have to have some admin skills.
Yeah.
Make sure things are planned ahead of time, all put in place, all those kind of things transfer.
Sure.
But yeah, very different. And I think executive pastor would make Eugene Peterson turn in his grave.
Yeah, he wouldn't like that?
I don't think so.
Did he he didn't really prefer any title to pastor, is that right?
Yeah, I think he just liked pastor.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I haven't, if there's an interview out there where they talk about even youth pastors or things of that nature, I'm not sure.
I mean, it's not unbiblical to have a emphasis. I think is it Timothy that refers to that basically the teaching elders.
So are we actually recording right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, but you can do.
No. Yeah, sorry. Keep going.
Yeah, like an elder with an emphasis on teaching. So there's obviously like categories where you're putting your gifts.
Right.
So I don't know that it's just we're all pastors and there's no kind of dividing of duties or anything. But I've read a number of guys who would argue like teaching, maybe this is contrary to what I just said, but they're like teaching pastor is not a thing.
Okay, so what do they say?
I think those arguments were like, again, I can't remember how they dealt with like the division of duties in scripture and like the elder who does more teaching and stuff. But
yeah.
I think they were like, maybe Eugene would be like this, like pastor is like actually shepherding, actually counseling, actually meeting, actually like being with people. The idea that your pastoral job is to be in a room 5 days a week, just studying, and then on Sundays preaching, like you're just this, that's all you do. They were like, not an entirely biblical, definition, but
okay.
But I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure if I agree with that or not. I probably haven't thought about it enough. And I also have a bit of a bias probably because the teaching pastor is where I would want to land.
Right.
So I should give more thought.
Yeah.
Probably, but like, that sounds like a dream to be if a church is like, okay, you're, not that you stay locked away.
Yeah.
24/7, but your primary,
right.
Our expectation of you is preaching and teaching, and so will do most of the visits, and so will do this, and I'd be like, that it would be amazing.
So, where is the threshold where we would say that person is no longer a pastor? If you looked at their day-to-day, week-to-week of what they actually do, is there a certain point where we go, let's just say, for example, that for argument's sake, we would say, well, if they are at least doing some of these things, then they're at least somewhat qualify as of pastoral duties or being a pastor or doing pastoral work. But is there a certain threshold where we go like, you're no longer what we would consider a pastor?
Yeah, well, what did Eugene... Oh, yeah, this is what he said. He... in the Unbusy Pastor.
Okay.
He, or no, that wasn't what the book was called. What was it called? I forget what the book, the something pastor, where he summed up the pastoral role as praying, preaching, and listening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that answers the question, but I mean, a very simplistic idea. So he's not necessarily... Well, probably the listening is including the visiting, though I don't... Was he talking there just about listening to the Lord or listening to people? I can't remember. But
yeah,
I think we definitely make the pastoral job too complicated sometimes. The other question maybe would be, this probably isn't answering your question, but by the time you get to a teaching pastor, you're getting there because your church has grown to such a size,
right,
that now you can have very specific
yes
pastors that like just deal with this and just this and just this. And the other question would be like, is that biblical or even maybe not biblical, but effective thing?
Okay,
to have a church
like
so big
model.
that you have all of these kind of very specific pastoral jobs.
Yeah. So then the alternative would be capping a church at a certain number that's manageable, so to speak, for one or let's say two full-time pastoral
that would be
positions.
Francis Chan's vision, right?
Yeah.
That we should cap this.
Well, and again,
once we get to here, let's break, because there are things that can happen within the size and maybe even location of a household.
Yeah.
Versus.
Yeah. Well, because again, we're using Eugene Peterson as kind of the example here, who's written about this and then lived it out.
Mm-hmm.
His church, I don't know if there's any specific reason for it, but it never grew to a massive size. And I'm sure just from what we've read of Eugene, he wouldn't have wanted it to.
Yeah.
But I don't know if he was faced with a dilemma where he had to go, okay, well, now we're going to have two churches, like another, or like a split or a church plant or, whatever. I mean, when he first started, he was literally going door to door to people.
Okay.
To go, we're starting this church. Do you want to come? And I mean, it originally started in his basement.
Okay.
The catacombs, they called it. And there was all of 12 of them, or, and then it just grew from there eventually, but then, leveled out. So, yeah, I mean, that's another whole question of the church model of North America or whatever is, I think it must be waning a little bit in terms of people's draw to mega churches, but maybe not.
It seems locally, at least, I don't know, call them mega churches, but the biggest churches around us, I feel like keep seeming to be descending in attendance.
Yeah. Okay.
As people are. And so some of the moves I've seen lately is people moving to smaller churches because they're finding more just plain biblical preaching and teaching in the smaller churches.
Yeah.
Or maybe the big ones that had a bit more of a seeker-sensitive feel to them. Some people at least starting to be like, no, that's not what we want. For some reason, realizing it now in this move to where smaller churches that seem to be then growing with a lot of this migration.
Yeah. And then how big was Keller's church?
I don't know. I'm on the internet. I could add. I think it was a few thousand.
Yeah. So,
but multiple services.
Yeah. Because we would say that Keller, in the words you're using, is very straightforward biblical doctrinal teaching. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily very showy.
In 2016, Redeemer averaged 5,300.
That's quite a bit, but
a combined 8 Sunday worship services.
Okay, wow, yeah.
But why did it started out too in an apartment? Like, how did it grow to that size?
Yeah,
because people were like, oh, some real biblical teaching there.
Yeah. I was looking at. This will be kind of a report I'll probably do as I finish at Gospel Chapel, but I was looking at the numbers of average attendance at Gospel Chapel, and the last year and this year are the lowest they have ever been since 1983.
Oh, wow.
Or something like that for an average
Before
attendance.
I was born.
Yeah, before we were both born. So it's almost always been average attendance over 200.
Okay.
And now it's like 170 or whatever. So, of course, speculation can be drawn on all sorts of fronts, including the fact that we've gone through this global pandemic and all of that entails.
Yeah.
And this will obviously be something that Gospel Chapel will continue to wrestle with into 2024. But I would argue that it's not because we've gotten any less biblical. You know, Doug and myself and others who preach very intentional on that. So, you know, why is there that trend, or what's going on in there? And even is it possible that it could be even a good thing for a bigger church like Gospel Chapel to actually be a little smaller in some ways, and people find what they need in smaller churches than Gospel Chapel, because Gospel Chapel is the biggest church in Grand Forks and the surrounding area. It's not by no means a mega church, but you know,
mega church by Grand Forks standards.
Yeah, and it's still, in my opinion, even with the 170-ish average attendance, requires more than one full-time pastor.
I mean, we're 50 to 80.
Yeah, wow.
And that feels full because we're in a small space.
Yeah.
But 170 is small for you. 170 to me sounds impossible. I'm like, how could I ever pastor 170 people?
Okay, but when you first started, day one, was it 12? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
If they all showed up.
Sure. So, I mean, in those days, were you like, if we had 50?
Oh, well, I say 170 sounds scary because already now that we're at 50 to 80.
Yeah, you're full.
How am I supposed to pastor this many people?
Yeah.
How do I even keep track of everyone?
Yeah.
I've asked a couple different guys. I'm like, come here and intern with me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I need more pastoral help.
To get the help. So what are the areas that you feel like you need the aid in?
Just like, I mean, even though a lot of these things are shared within the church, but it can still be helpful to have kind of leadership in it. And, you know, the leadership doesn't have to be like paid staff, but maybe just appointing. But I need the things that fall through the cracks easily as we get bigger, I think, are one, literally just connecting with people. Mm-hmm. Making people feel seen and noticed and connected, and then especially discipling, like connecting in deeper ways, actually knowing people's lives, being able to walk with them in those seasons of life. Actually intentionally discipling people. Again, not that all falls to the pastor, but even just more help in helping equip the church for discipling. Just spiritual care. I think. And trying to, again, not do it all, but trying to lead the church in spiritual care. Is you just get outnumbered so quickly. It's like, okay, with 12 people, even though financially it wasn't sustainable for a pastor to be a full-time pastor, but that is not necessarily a problem. Maybe that's just my problem. That's not, maybe pastors need to go back to being okay with not being on salaries or whatever. That's, we didn't need to grow just because of that. But 12 people was very easy to keep track of people, to connect with people. I mean, literally I could connect with every person in the church every week. Whether phone call or otherwise.
Right.
But that's not possible anymore.
I
don't think, for me to have a home life and
even in a
do
month
other
would
things
just be
and
maybe enough.
Connect with or even know who are all the people that are a part of our church. You grow, it gets tricky.
So then maybe therein lies, not like we're really revealing anything new in this world, but therein lies the need for specific pastoral positions, or at least staff positions. All of a sudden you have more teenagers showing up on Sundays being like, oh, we need to minister to the teenagers. We need a youth coordinator, youth director, youth pastor. Or a church gets to a size that you have a multiple staff team, and it's kind of like, oh, somebody needs to kind of organize this team or manage the team or help. I mean, that's how
I like the language team better than staff, I think. Because it's potentially that they don't have to necessarily be staff in the idea of like a paid staff.
Right.
And even I don't need to be. But if there's a ministry team, which Paul seemed to kind of have, as he talks about co-laborers in the gospel, people he relied on, worked with. Like, it's going to be a real thing.
Well, and so in the executive pastor role, I felt my shift of pastoring move to the staff team, the team leaders. So those are people who are overlooking the groups of ministries at Gospel Chapel. I'm giving pastoral care and leadership and discipleship to those individuals. And the team leader positions are not paid, but kind of moving the focus to helping organize those to then go and multiply kind of from there.
Yeah.
So, I think it's a great position if you get hung up on the semantics, perhaps it's semantics of titles, but there's definitely a pastoral aspect to it as well, where you're giving that pastoral care or leadership to other leaders, and then also just other people in the congregation too. But it also, in many ways, hopefully frees a guy like Doug up to go do more teaching, preaching, pastoral care when he doesn't have to worry about A, B, C, and D or whatever.
Sure.
So, that's one aspect of it.
Yeah, that made sense.
But, yeah.
Okay, as you're wrapping up, what has been the best part or parts of pastoring?
Ooh, that's a good question. There's something about being a pastor where you get to be really involved with people's lives, which is, I think, just an honor. So when I think about youth ministry, I mean, even when I was a youth pastor, there's a lot of just congregational pastoral work and care that I was doing when Henry Clausen was there, and then of course when Doug showed up too, and in between when I was working with a transitional pastor. You're just constantly thinking, praying, and caring for people. So there's something cool about that in the sense that you get a privileged opportunity and just an honor to walk with people. The difficulty is that entails really deep, dark lows, but also highs. And so I always think of that from like the wedding to the funeral. You get to be with people and or like a baptism.
Yep.
You get to baptize people and disciple and work with them and talk with them.
Or a dedication.
I didn't do any dedications, but
okay.
Yeah.
But you could be there right from the start of life.
Yeah, when they're born. Sure, yeah.
I mean, if you were there long enough.
Well, and it was funny because, my first year at Gospel Chapel, there were kids born that are now in youth group.
Okay.
So, yeah, you kind of, they were in the youth ministry on my last year kind of there, that they were just born when I started. So, yeah, there's something really cool about that. And you get to walk with them from day one, and they become family and all that kind of stuff. And you're giving that care, the shepherding care. But yeah, you see them on like a baptism or on a wedding day, and you get to be really involved in that part, which is really cool and honoring. And then you're handed something in a way that's really delicate in the sense of talking through someone when they're going through a divorce or a really difficult time or a death in the family. And that's also on a level honoring, that they entrust that to you as someone that they feel that they can talk to and you can work with. So those aspects are, I'll certainly miss, though I'm sure I'll still be involved in some of that too, pastorally. And then I think the other thing, especially with youth ministry, is just seeing students grow, but also in the congregation when you're doing that discipleship process, or you see students even come to know the Lord, and then you see them grow from there. It's really cool, and I just love that part of it. Not in the sense of like, oh, look what I've accomplished by being a part of their life, but just how God has worked in their lives and changed and transformed people. And, you know, I mentioned that a little bit actually on Sunday in my sermon with Tyson Tiller.
Yeah, I heard
and
that.
Just how cool, you know, getting a message like that is like, wow, like that's so cool. And I think of a guy like Ben Nicholson, who's serving the Lord in significant ways, who was coming through our church. And so those things are really, really cool. And I think as a church, a Gospel Chapel, but I think all churches need to continue to focus in on that kind of stuff as pastors, but also as just congregation members, is bringing people in and doing that discipleship stuff. So yeah,
that's
so I'll
someone
miss
like
that.
being a dad.
Yeah.
I mean, your favorite things are kind of the same things, like getting to be there in important parts of life and getting to see people grow.
Totally.
Kind of the same joys you take in your kid.
Yeah, I mean, and I love the shepherd aspect of the pastoral, and I love the serving aspect and following after Christ in that as best as I can, and just being there for people. Now, of course, the dark side of that is you get a bit of an ego. You can get a bit of an ego with that, being like, oh, I'm needed, and I like being needed, or I like pleasing people, or whatever there. But if you can walk away from those things and keep that at bay, I think the real essence of that pastoral work is being there for people and serving people.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I definitely miss that.
I won't ask this. I'll go on to another one. But another question of that would be like, would it be okay to be a pastor and for those not to be your favorite parts? I mean, what you explained there seems pretty essential to what it is to be a shepherd. What if people were like, I
think it's a good question. I don't think you're maybe as effective as a pastor, even in a biblical sense, I think your title should change then at that point.
Sure. And that's maybe where we're getting to like teaching pastor these different things.
Then, so like even with the executive pastor piece that I'm doing, you could make that into a role that is like, we're hiring you as the manager. Yeah. Or whatever, or like a COO almost, if you wanted to get into like more of a business term kind of thing. And I don't necessarily think that's completely wrong if it's, serving the greater organization of the church and again helping the pastors do their pastoral work, but then don't call them a pastor. I was trying to think about this with other fields of work, but it's almost like if you had a hospital and you had someone who's just managing schedules and the nurses and the doctors and all that kind of stuff, which there are those positions, but they don't call them the doctor.
Though probably more times than not, the like director of the hospital or whatever it might be was probably a doctor.
Yes, which helps if they know that.
Those experiences, that training, that title.
True.
But now the job has developed into more managerial than medical aid. Yeah. Okay, so what would you say were the most not the parts you dislike the most, but what were the hardest parts of the job of the pastor or your role as a pastor?
Well, I think again it's the same answer in a sense that it's still the people.
Sure.
So the greatest joy is the people and the greatest struggle is the people.
Yeah.
Because there were a number of stories where it's like, oh man, I am really frustrated with this person or these people. And it's hard to, and I remember when I first started, which seems like a long time ago. In some ways, 12 years is a long time. In other ways, it's not. But when I first started, so I was 23 and I'm 35 now, almost 36. I had a few people come to me asking for my credentials from Briarcrest, what courses I took, if I was they were fishing to see if I was actually qualified.
Sure.
Now, on some level,
their qualifications.
Yeah, whatever they thought was qualified. And there was one for sure that was, they thought a youth ministry degree was a bit of a sham. And I could understand where they're coming from in a sense, but it was almost like I had to go, yes, I've studied the Bible while I was at Briarcrest. And so, there's those kind of things that really can wear you down.
Yep.
And there's this level at which you have whatever the number of congregation you have, it feels like they're all your boss.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that just, for pastors today, they just have to actually know that that's not true and not let that happen to them or something. Yeah. But that, especially when I was young, I still am young, but it was like hard not to get away from that, especially when you work at a church. And I can see this as being now, especially one of the detriments of working at a church you grew up in, is you have these people who helped mold and shape you and mentor you. And then you become a pastor and you are not over them, but you are shepherding them, but they are...
And they have to try and shift out of the role of mentor.
Yeah.
Because if they still see themselves as your mentor,
yeah,
it would be difficult to submit to pastoral authority.
And I think some people struggle with that. I think on the whole, it went really well, and people were very gracious, and I felt heard, and I felt like people did respect what my opinion was on matters or leadership and all that kind of stuff. But there's always that there, mm-hmm. and I think you kind of hit a bit of a wall or a ceiling. So yeah, I think that's one of those things where it's like I shouldn't say everyone. A lot of people feel the need to tell you how you're doing, mm-hmm. constantly. So
they think it's helpful to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're coming from a good spot, most of them. There's a very small number that are like intentionally.
Is there something about a pastoral job that versus like a doctor or a lawyer or something where they think the average person thinks they have more insight to your job to offer you than like I'm not going to go to my doctor and be like, I think you're doing well at this, but you're lacking here. Like I don't have enough insight or understanding of the job to speak to that. But is there something that people with a pastoral job, they feel like they have a fair bit of, which isn't not true, because they've looked at the same scriptures, hopefully, and stuff, but like they feel they have more to offer.
Yeah, for sure. So I think your analogy with the doctor, more so than ever now, people go, well, like I know just as much as you because I read this internet
that is true
thing,
WebMD or whatever,
or YouTube video and stuff. Mm-hmm. Now that's still an outlier overall, but historically, I think for sure people go, well, okay, Ben's reading the Bible. I've been reading the Bible longer than he has, and now he's teaching me on it.
We were reading the same book.
Yeah, and some people go, well, the qualification level. Some people might think I'm more qualified mm-hmm. than actually Ben or Ryley or whoever the pastor is.
Yeah.
To do it. I don't want to be the pastor, but I have this. Or I used to be a pastor, and instead of giving good mentoring, coaching, mm-hmm. it's more critique or criticism. So there is that level, and I think there's also still maybe less, but with a doctor or a lawyer, mm-hmm. there's a level of just respect because we know that it's not easy to become a doctor or a lawyer.
Yeah.
Based on the fact of how many years of school
sure,
and
that's
stuff.
A good point.
Whereas the pastoral role,
mm-hmm.
you could have someone who's a pastor of a church who's never done any education.
Sure.
Now, most churches, I think, don't go that route. But then you have pastors who have a BA, so like 4 years, or an MA, which now they've up to 6, or MDiv, or on and on. And I don't know that they're necessarily respected on the same kind of level. And maybe
sure.
they shouldn't be, because it probably is harder to do the work to become a doctor or lawyer than it is to go through seminary. I don't know for sure. But I think on some level they go, I'm not, and then that goes back to the thing, like, where did you get the degree? It's like, oh, that Bible college? Well, I know what they think about this, and this, so I don't really think it's reputable.
I mean, kind of nobody, too, like, if you're talking BA, like, nobody doesn't get into Bible college.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
It's like being rejected from going to Bible camp. It's like, no, we welcome everyone. So they're like,
for sure.
It's not hard to get into Bible college.
Yeah.
It's and like you went to Duke or something.
And I mean, obviously, I think after a BA, if a pastor has at least a master's or whatever, there is another level of like, okay, well, now the work is higher.
Though I would say even maybe in that, I think the average person has a better understanding of the rigorousness of med school than, I'm not saying seminary is equal to med school by any means, but I don't think people even have, the average person even really any kind of understanding of what we're doing at seminary.
Sure.
We might just be sitting in a room and sharing stories and feelings and where med school you can kind of picture, or law school, or you've seen enough shows. Movies or something. You have an idea of what they're doing there.
Yeah.
Seminary, I don't think there's any concept.
Yeah. And I mean,
I don't know that people even equate seminary with college often. They're like seminary is a whole nother word. Like,
what does that mean?
You went to a divinity school? What does that mean?
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess is fair in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even with this new job I'm starting in January, one of the requirements they'll have of me is to get like a doctorate level degree in order to fulfill certain requirements. And thankfully, I'll only have to be enrolled and working on it to be able to do the work they want me to do. Mm-hmm. But the conversation I had with Marv Penner around this, who holds a PhD and so forth, said, well, if you're looking between a PhD or a D-Min, it depends what you're going to want to do going forward, because that will have certain connotations for people, right or wrong, of what you carry into the room.
For sure.
So if you have a PhD, it's like no questions asked about your reputable status almost, and especially if you're going to write books or study and different things. If you have a D-Min, you're still pretty heavy leaning into the ministry world. Yeah. And he even said I think it's fair for me to say that he said this, but he said it could even be a detriment in certain rooms that you have a D-Min, because they'll go, that's not.
You got a ministry degree?
Yeah. Like what does that actually mean? Or is that, it's kind of hokey. And again, it's not that it's completely unfair what they're getting at. So I think all that to come back to the fact that when it comes to a congregation and how they view their pastor, it's not enough for a pastor to say, look, I've been to school for 8+ years, or I've even written this book, or I know Hebrew and Greek. Yeah. They go, these are dead languages that I don't care about, or, whatever. Why does that even matter? And I mean, the work it takes, and I haven't done it, to learn these languages, only from other students that I went to college with, where they're basically in tears in their dorm room for how hard it is. It's just not there. So then I think there's a level at which people feel that they can speak in such a way. I think the people who get it more, and again, my experience at Gospel Chapel has been very positive, so it's not like this was the case besides a few people. But I think more so people go, okay, our pastor has a calling, and we're going to respect that calling because we feel like that's a calling from the Lord. And especially if that does line up with that shepherding care of the pastor, that they're like, oh, this guy should be a pastor, and they're not like abusive and crazy and whatever else. So they respect the calling, I think, more.
Okay, so here's my next question then. How is the job of a pastor different when it's understood as a calling versus a career? Or other way around, if you want.
I think we get back to the conversation around like just general skills of the job, as opposed to the the spiritual end of shepherding, of care, of prayer, of ministering to people. So I think if what you're asking here is there's something that carries you through all of the ups and downs of the job when you feel called to it. When it's just a career or a job, then you can be separated from it emotionally almost. And you just can't do that as a pastor. It's not possible.
I wonder if a lot of the guys that, or let's say some at least of the guys that kind of burn out in ministry, fall out of ministry, kind of morally fail in ministry, if sometimes a foundational cause of that is that they went into it as a career versus a calling.
Yeah.
So there wasn't that calling to whether carry them through or hold them to a standard or the job or,
Yeah.
I think understanding as a calling can be, which is how it should be. It can just have massive implications.
Yeah.
For the congregation and for the pastor. Sorry.
No, that's good. I think you're absolutely right. And or what happens maybe in some of these situations is there was a calling, but they lost the calling along the way and it became a career, or they lost sight of it, or
not necessarily that they lost the calling and that they weren't called anymore, but they lost, as you said, sight of the calling, and in their mind it became career now.
And I think even more so than just it becomes the career job is they started reading their own, what's the word? They read their own mail. And they started to see themselves as the guy, instead of pointing everyone to Jesus. And again, I want to be careful naming names sometimes, but, if we look at Mark Driscoll or Hybels or some of these others with moral failures and other things like that, it's got to start getting to your own head. And when that happens, it becomes probably more of a job, career, all that kind of stuff. And it starts to look less and less like a pastor, because a pastor doesn't abuse or yell at staff or people or threaten and all that stuff.
Or even have any, not any because we're human, but I think caught up in career is kind of then the ambition to climb the career ladder. The focus is kind of on yourself a little, which is I think what I kind of hear you saying. You got to sell more books. I got to bump up the salary. I got to do this. Career focus, I think, inherently is very self-focused. It's like your career.
Yeah.
I gotta get to the top of this career. Whereas a calling, maybe you can find yourself more settled, like Peterson, and like the church was this size and it's still this size.
Yeah.
And that's okay because I'm called to serve. I'm just here to fulfill my function for the Lord, to be the gardener, to lay it on enough track for the congregation to get to tomorrow.
Yeah.
Rather than trying to, climb some ladder for myself.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. I think in some way even the pastor of 2023 to soon to be 2024, their platform should continue to shrink, not grow.
Sure.
In some ways.
Mm-hmm.
It's always delicate because people would say, well, our pastor is getting more opportunities to speak to bigger crowds or write these books or be on the podcast or whatever, which can be really good things for the gospel kingdom, but not if they start to, it's like gain the whole world and lose your soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when we start to fade out of the feeling called and moving into the career end of things.
And do you think on the front end of it, because pastoral ministry is so kind of thought of in terms of a career now, even if the language isn't used, that people are choosing it as a career rather than being called into it?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you think people are doing that now? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, because we've created whether for good or bad, the system of becoming a pastor looks identical. The reason we can compare it to law school or med school or anything is because the kind of the track to get there looks exactly the same as any other career. Instead of going for 4 or 5 years to this school, I will go for 4 or 5 years to this school. And when I come out the other end of that school, I will, instead of getting a salary as a pastor, I'll get a salary as a doctor, I'll get a salary as a pastor, and like the same expectations of like, and then I'll get like healthcare, like benefits, and like everything about it is patterned after every other career. So it's hard not to think of it as a career when you're at the beginning of your career life and you're thinking, what should I do as a career? And pastoral ministry is there as a career option for you to choose off the platter of like careers.
Oh yeah. Right? Interesting.
So how many guys are then being like, oh, that sounds like a good one. I'm interested in that. Maybe feel this or that about it affirmed by someone.
Yeah.
Like you choose it kind of as a career.
Yeah.
At no part in that was there necessarily, or did there have to be a calling?
Yeah.
You were able to choose it as a career path.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's a really good thought because could we say that there's also callings in other careers too? I feel called to become a doctor, or I feel called to run a daycare.
Yeah, that's a good, valid point.
Those things too. But I think you're right. There was, when I started at Briarcrest in 2007 in the youth ministry program with Marv Penner, I did say this to Marv, but I was like, oh man, there's a lot of people in this class starting the same year as me that I hope never become youth pastors. In some ways. Now, that's maybe a bit judgmental, but and a lot of them, by the time we got to the 4th year, you shrunk down for various reasons, and maybe people were feeling it out or trying to find their place as well. But I think maybe it's not the same anymore, but at least then it was kind of like, man, I loved youth group and camp ministry because it was fun. I want to do this full time. And Marv pushed and others, and then the way I framed it too was the youth pastor role is a pastoral role. Like you're not the youth babysitter, game planner, whatever. It is a pastoral position. So it's even though you're not maybe the lead pastor or teaching pastor or associate sometimes or whatever, you're still a pastor. And again, primarily focused on the youth, teenagers and youth age, but also many times you're still a pastor in the congregation for people. So so I don't know if that plays into that too, where it's like, but I just don't know how many people are viewing the pastoral role now and going, that looks like fun, or I really want to, and maybe there are, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people tell me, they're like, I don't know how you did it.
I wonder how many people are choosing it and how many people are feeling or discerning being chosen for it. Because those can produce very different results. But you're right that you can be called to other jobs. But I think that's an important question on search committees. Like, trying to discern with that person you're looking at, has there been a calling in your life to this? Lots of stool or zero stool, irregardless. What have you?
For sure.
What does that look like in your life? Okay, let me ask you a similar question. How is the job different or understood differently by the pastor and or the congregation when your pay is understood by salary versus support?
Oh.
I can explain that more if that doesn't make sense.
Are you saying essentially like, so if I'm a pastor who is financially supported, then perhaps there's more ownership from my supporters over what I do, as opposed to a salary is more of a career kind of buzzword? Or
yeah, it would be very linked to the career calling, I think. But like, yeah, like, or is there a difference to the job or the understanding of a job when either you think of yourself or congregation thinks of you that like you're being paid to do a job, or freed up by support to fulfill, to serve, to fulfill a calling. I think a missionary is a good picture of it. Is like you don't ever really think of a missionary as being paid to perform a job.
Right.
You are supporting a missionary so that they're freed up from jobs, essentially, so that they can be very intentional and involved in ministry. But you're not thinking like that as you're supporting them. You're not thinking I'm paying them to make disciples. I'm paying per disciple, or it's not a one for one thing.
Yeah.
Like a transaction. It's like Old Testament. Like, here, we're gonna, for the Levites or something. Like, here, I'll give you part of my wool and wine and whatever.
Yeah.
So you're freed up from having to go into the fields, so you can go into the church.
Right.
It wasn't let me pay you in wine for what you did today in the temple. Is that just silly semantics, or is there a difference in the understanding of the job, the performance of the job, what the expectations of the job, whatever? If even just if the money, it's the same money no matter what, but if it's understood as support versus payment.
Yeah, I think you still run into the same problem, and some of it is probably a good thing, because it has to be accountability. So if I'm supporting a missionary, but they're not doing missions work, I find that they're like kind of doing a little bit, but they're mostly at home, or they're mostly working at an office, maybe not even linked to the mission.
Yeah.
There's still accountability where I go, well, I don't know that I'm putting my money towards that.
Okay.
In the same way, if we view the pastoral role as a local missionary, which is Henry Clausen would often say, that he's a Grand Forks missionary, then there's a level of accountability that he is doing the work that he is called to, and that we're holding him to on some level. So that being said, I think no matter what happens, you can't get away from people struggling with, I tie to this church, therefore I'm supporting you financially, therefore I have a say on what you do. Okay. I think it has to end with, I tie to the church, the money goes, and the Lord will do with it as the Lord wills, and I'm going to hold my pastors accountable to the work that they're called to, in the sense that I want to hold them to a biblical account, but not do what I want you to do.
Well, that's, I think, one of the differences, maybe, that I think that, like, when it's understood as, whether for the congregant or the pastor, that, like, when it's more career, like, you're being paid to do this, then for the pastor, there's an unhealthy pressure, I think, on, like, you better really perform this week, man, on the sermon.
Yeah.
Or else, I don't know, you might not get paid.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And when a person holds their tithe that way,
that's nuts.
They have some control over you, kind of, because they're paying your salary.
Right.
I think that also is unhealthy. The congregation, like you say, needs to understand that they're giving to the church, and the pastor hopefully can understand, because of how the congregation and elders board supports him and communicates him, that he's being supported, and he's kind of freed up to do ministry.
Yeah. I think that way is a better model for sure, if we can view it that way, to go, especially, like, in order for Ben not to have to go work a part-time job as well as fulfill the duties biblically given to care for us, we will tithe so that Ben or Ryley doesn't have to go out and work at a coffee shop part-time or something. For sure is a good way to view it. there is, what was I going to say? I think the only other way you get around it, and I don't know if it helps at all, we'd have to talk to some other or denominations, is when a denomination pays the pastor from the denomination and not from the local congregation. Mm-hmm. So if the MB conference were to set my salary, it came from them, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And the local congregation in their yearly budget had no line item that goes to paying staff, the view might still be different, though I don't know if it's better or worse. Because at the end of the day, then it's still just the money probably has to get to the MB conference from the local churches anyway to disperse. I don't know. But yeah, it does. It always gets weird with money, especially if people think you're making too much money. Like there's always this mindset of like, well, pastors shouldn't make too much. We want to keep them humble or something weird. I mean, even when Shane and I over the last 12 years would look at used vehicles, it was like, let's make sure it doesn't have a BMW symbol, a Mercedes symbol.
Sure.
You know, even if it was an old used $3,000 car or something, or someone even were to donate it, it would be like, I don't want to be seen driving that.
Yeah.
And some of that is for valid reasons, but some of it's just like, I mean, even when I borrow my parents' super nice truck or Jeep or whatever they have, I always get comments like, oh, we're paying you maybe too much, or like, oh, you know, you're driving that thing around, you know. And I'm always like, why is it any of your business? Sure. You know, on some level. So, you know, that's annoying.
I think the missionary has often felt the same
sure
kind of pressures that, like, say they get their monthly support in the mail, and then like, oh, what will my donors think if they see me like at a coffee shop with this money, or like kind of silly things sometimes, but like you feel a pressure, because as if people are supporting you because that they have expectations as they give you their support, which shouldn't. I mean, as you say, there should be accountability. I don't think there should be strings and expectations to support. You're trusting that missionary to use their support as they think wisest.
Oh yeah.
You also are supporting them so that they can also enjoy aspects of life too, right? You don't see the missionary at the coffee shop or whatever. Or
it's
God
weird.
forbid driving a car and be like, what?
Yeah.
But
I mean, it's hard because for the last 12 plus years, I rely on the Gospel Chapel congregation to give, to pay for my salary. Yeah. You know, that doesn't mean they have ownership over me or get to tell me what to do and so forth, but I still rely on them to make a living wage.
Yeah. I suppose the difference too would be, like, as you say, you're relying on them, not unlike Home Hardware is relying on people giving them money by buying products. Except with ministry, the product is kind of removed and people are just giving money. The problem is when people think that there is a product, or suppose that, like, I don't know, the gospel is the product that they're kind of paying for. So now again, there's an expectation for them almost as a customer. Of what you're going to do, and like this whole consumer mentality gets wrapped up in the church.
Exactly.
Just through a lot of, I think, semantics that have powerful implications.
Yeah, which then we have to just get back to a proper definition of what church is, because even with me leaving in January from the pastoral position, it's an interesting conversation that probably we don't need to have today, but if people leave Gospel Chapel now because of me, I would hope that they have a really good reason that is rooted in a biblical purpose around that. Because they shouldn't have been coming to the church because of me to begin with.
Sure. Let me throw one scenario at you, though, that maybe would be relevant, and see if you think. What if someone was coming to a church because of the leadership in that church? That they respected, valued, appreciated the leadership, and then that leader leaves, and then maybe another leader comes in or something, and they.
Yeah.
Again, you have to get to the reasons for it, whether there's biblical reasons there for why they don't like or respect or value the new leadership. But is leadership enough of a reason to, as the leadership changes, that congregations kind of change a little?
It's probably fair, and that's probably a fair scenario. I would just hope that, because the flip side of being like, well, the pastor better do what I want, or I get the product I want, is that if they are getting what they want and they like it, then as soon as it stops, then they're like, "Wow, I'm out of here."
Yeah.
So, but I do think you're right in the sense that leadership changes over, and you're like, "Oh, I don't know about these leaders," or I don't, I think that's different for sure. And I'm hopeful for Gospel Chapel going forward.
Yeah.
The leadership is still strong there without me, and if it's not, then that's a problem that. I play a part in then that I'm putting so much on me for the success of a church that as soon as I leave, things crumble. And this is not the case when it comes to Gospel Chapel. It does not rely on me. Sure, I cover a lot of different things, but it'll be just fine because the Lord is involved, just as it was just fine without me before I started.
But church hopping makes complete sense when ingrained in a church is the consumeristic idea.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Because then you're there to get something, and if the thing you're getting changes, then let me go somewhere else to get what I want.
Yeah.
If you're attending, or not attending even, a part of a church to be giving, serving the church, building up the church, using your gifts for the edification of the church, then you receiving is a byproduct, but it's not the main goal, in which case I think it becomes far harder to leave a church, because it's not about what you're, even though you still want to, what you're consuming to be biblical, Christ centered, like teaching and such, but like it's not about your consuming. You're not so easily like, I didn't get what I wanted this Sunday, so I'm going to pop over here. Oh, that felt better.
Yeah.
That tasted good. I'll stay here for a little while. Like, it's all about what you're consuming. I mean, we restaurant hop for that reason, because eating is about consuming.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think the church, the only thing you should be looking, I shouldn't say the only thing. One of the things you should be looking for within a church is this church helping me go deeper in my relationship with Jesus? Am I getting more Jesus every week because I'm part of this congregation, because people are challenging me, encouraging me, because the sermon is leading me to Christ, and so forth? If you're hitting those things, then so what if the worship team was a bit out of tune, or the sermon didn't use as many illustrations as you wanted, or on and on and on? It all should be pointing that. And then also, how am I serving to make that happen as well? So even for Shane and I, come January 1st, when I'm no longer a pastor at Gospel Chapel, we're already thinking through what capacity will I continue to serve in at Gospel Chapel, maybe after a number of months kind of stepping back, but where am I best going to be suited to serve the church when there isn't the title of pastor by my name?
I was already wondering, will it be strange for you, even for 5 seconds, to all of a sudden be submitting to a pastor? I mean, you've already been submitting to an elders board. Yeah. But like that now you're under the pastor or pastors.
Yeah. I don't feel like I'll have a hard time with that, but I guess we'll see. I wonder if any of the elders or Doug will have any awkwardness of being the authority over me in a more direct way going forward. But I don't think it will be a problem. But it is an interesting question. Though it's a whole weird thing to think about. I mean, I've been like up to my eyeballs in work, and I probably will right to the last day of just stuff I'm trying to get done before I finish. But I haven't thought a lot about this, but I it is a really weird thing. December 31st is my last day of employment.
Yeah.
And I preach that day. I'm baptizing someone that day.
Oh, wow.
And then last night someone made a
Marrying
joke, a community
someone.
group that like, well, if you need to do an exorcist or something like exorcism or, maybe you can throw that in there. But that literally by the time the church service is finished, and we go for lunch after church, I will no longer be called, not like many people call me this, but Pastor Ben.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing, but at some level, I don't think you ever, especially after you've been a pastor for a while, you don't ever, you're never not a pastor in some sense.
Sure.
Like how many people still call Henry Pastor Henry? He'll be Pastor Henry till the day he dies, and I think that's great. So it's there's an identity thing there too, which we probably don't have time to go into today, but that's that, how are you a pastor one day and then you wake up the next and it's like, I am no longer a pastor.
Kind of like, one day you were, maybe doctors always go to doctor's appointments too, but like one day you were a doctor and the next day you're going to see a doctor.
Yeah.
The weird switch. Not necessarily, I don't know if that happens with doctors. They probably always see other doctors because you can't really see yourself necessarily. But like, you're the pastor and then all of a sudden now you're the layman submitting to the pastor.
Yeah, though I've already gotten a few nominations for elder.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Which I will not be
back over the pastor.
That's right. I will not be accepted.
Okay, well, what would be your advice to a young pastor just starting, even though you're still a young pastor?
Yeah.
But maybe to yourself 12 years ago?
Yep, I would
Would
tell.
you be like, don't?
No, I would say.
Head for open waters.
I would say it's going to be great, and for sure. I would say I think two things. One would be make sure you prioritize your family, like your spouse, your kids, those kind of things. Don't lose sight of that. But I think the other thing is don't have a fear. Try not to get caught up in the fear of man, but fear God. So do what you think the Lord is calling and asking of you, even though it can be really hard. And that would be my biggest regret, that I too often just acquiesce to people's demands, opinions, frustrations, when I knew the right thing to do was what the Lord was asking me to change certain things or do certain things.
Yeah.
If I would have gone back, I wish I would have stuck to that. So I think a young pastor, I would say, it's hard, especially when you're young.
Yep.
But I would say if you feel the Lord is telling you to do this, then stick with it and he'll carry you through.
Galatians 1:10, where Paul says, if pleasing people were my goal, I would not be a servant of Christ.
Yeah. What version is that?
That was King James.
Okay.
What would ESV say?
No, I mean, that's...
Or what would Peterson say? For am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? Or am I trying to please man? If I were still trying to please man, I would not be a servant of Christ.
Yeah. And I think I should have had that pinned somewhere around my office or, I mean, it's similar in a way, but it's like that quote, whether it's actually a true quote or not, from Henry Ford, that it's like if I would have given what people wanted, I would have given them faster horses instead of better cars or, something like that.
Yep.
So it's a tough one, but, cause you also have to watch your own ego in that and your own pride.
Yep.
But that would be one thing.
Are pastors still crucial today, or are they outdated and can be replaced?
They are absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
What you think they would? Or
no, I agree with you. I just think as culture, progresses, if you want to say, or at least moves forward, like preaching from a pulpit, like kind of a lot of elements of church services, not making the church fit into just Sundays, but like can look kind of antique. Yeah. I think in the world's eyes, like it kind of like a herald on the street. Like there's things that seem like ancient that we're still practicing. But I mean, that's what our faith is. Like we were practicing like something that happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
That still has power today.
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus lived a long time ago, even though he still lives today. But
yeah,
I wonder sometimes if if people can have that thought that like the preacher seems outdated,
right,
or the pastor seems outdated.
Yeah,
I don't know what he could be replaced by, but maybe people are like, man, we just need AI, or we just need YouTube now. Don't really need the church, or just need.
Yeah.
No, but having walked through it for 12 years now.
Yeah.
As much as day one, you're still like, pastor is essential.
I would say more than ever now, even more than 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Because the need for truth, if I can be so bold to say it, it might be, maybe it's a very uneducated thing to say. The need for truth is needed more today than it was.
Why do you think that's an uneducated thing to say?
Oh, just because I have nothing to back that up on.
Oh,
statistically or any research. I just it's more of a speculation, or just the internet age that everyone's finding their truth all over the place. Or maybe
just the fact that nobody knows what's true or what's not.
Yeah,
it'd be the need for.
Well, and even with the AI stuff, there's a lot of stuff we could use that's good for it, but there's also like, I don't know if that's real or not. You can get tricked by AI.
Even when it comes to what's true and what's not, right?
Yeah.
Whether it be facts, true or false or whatever. So there was a song that came out this last week, which I forget who the artists were on it, but nobody had heard directly from the artist. So the question on the internet, even being asked by like news agencies, was like, is this actually the artist, or kind of we being tricked here? Because obviously it sounds identical to them. But now AI is capable of that. So nobody had confirmed for the whole week whether the song, which was getting great reviews, was actually from the artist it was listed from, which is a crazy time to live in. Yeah. You're like, you hear them singing, you're like, you don't even know necessarily if it was them.
Trust that it could be.
Yeah.
So, I mean, who better in the day and age than pastors? To be the equippers of truth, or you know, the heralds of truth out there. So we need even more. And then I think along with that is the shepherding care and counselor piece that is going to be needed more than ever.
1 Timothy 3:15. Remember the church of the living God, the pillar and the foundation of the truth.
Yeah,
I mean that's what the whole church is supposed to be. A pillar of truth in a world that is lacking in it.
And that's where if congregants can understand that role of the pastor is not just for a 40-minute sermon once a week, though that's also valuable, but that they go, okay, this is someone who cares for me, or should anyway.
Yeah.
That also spent lots of time on a message for me, thinking of me and giving me the truth. I mean, tongue in cheek, I've said this a few times already, but this last Sunday, as you know, I got up for my sermon, and we were short on time. And so in my head, I go, man, I've been working on this for 2 weeks. And this last sermon, I was really wrestling and struggling with. So I'm like, on one part in my head, I was like, everyone's going to sit and listen to this because I spent so much time on this, they need to hear it. Excuse me. And of course, at the end of the sermon, Rob McIver came up to me and was like, don't cut anything from your sermon. We will just listen, don't worry about the time. And I appreciate that. And at the same time, I also know what could be most effective is to boil things down in the right way to still give the same truth in a fashion that I know people are going to hear it. But if people are coming in on a Sunday to go, I need more truth in my life, essentially I need more Jesus in my life, the pastor is going to bring that for me, then pastors are needed more than ever today. So,
and how now will your time as a pastor change how you relate to your pastor after December?
Well, I mean,
will you treat him any differently? Or think of him any differently? I
think my tithing will change. Okay. I'll probably give less depending on the certain. I mean, if I am not the number one supporter of Doug and the elders, then we probably have some big problems. after being in the trenches with them for 12 plus years.
Yeah. Can I ask clarification? So it's probably both, but not just recognizing the struggles they face, but also appreciating the great, the benefit, the things that they do.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Like recognizing the hard things and appreciating the good things.
Yep.
As you look at them.
Yeah, appreciating the good things in what way are you thinking?
I mean, like when you look at Doug now through the week, maybe like you're having been through it, you'll be able to recognize not only how hard Doug's week might have been,
right,
but also appreciate the things Doug is giving you. Like maybe appreciate a sermon on a different level.
Sure.
Or like the care he's given.
Yeah.
And maybe those go together. Maybe you'll appreciate the things he does because you know the struggle that produced them.
Yeah.
Or something.
Well, and then even just being in the rooms for all, like, I think I added up just a bit over 150 elders meetings is what I've been to, which obviously a lot of people have been to far more. But just hearing the hearts, listening to the prayers. Every Friday morning, our elders team gets together just to pray for the congregation. Knowing all that, and then be a congregant to go, I know they're in there praying for me, and that they're listening to the Lord, and that they're, in the right way of the word, they're doing their best. So I would be insane not to be, one, benefiting from that myself in the sense of receiving their prayers, receiving their guidance, and so forth. But two, also not being their, not being a great supporter and being there for them in any way I can.
So it would be right if after this, Doug and any other pastors find you to be kind of the most the easiest congregant to pastor.
I would hope so.
Not the most difficult.
If come January, I'm a thorn in the flesh, then I've really failed.
Okay, this is my last question.
Okay.
And then you got to go. What do you think, as you're going, is the most important topic for the church right now to have strong biblical disciplined teaching on? Like a topic that maybe to this point is under taught on, instructed on, that really needs some in-depth study.
Oh man, that's a really good question. The one that comes to mind right away without having thought about this is the sexual identity, LGBTQ, all that kind of stuff, that identity piece. Just because I feel like we haven't talked a lot about it.
Yep.
I think we're behind there.
Yeah.
And we need to not just be silent.
Yep.
Silence is better than teaching that, here's what, shifting what the Bible says about it or giving things that aren't true. Mm-hmm. But silence isn't much better than that. So we need to actually give biblical unpacking a doctrine of what God's plan is for sexuality and so forth. But outside of, the other thing that comes to mind right away is just the continual teaching on Jesus, how to read our Bibles and be in the Word and in being in prayer. I mean, those things are super important all the time. But
I imagine, like you mentioned, Henry, is you'll continue now as a more behind the scenes pastor, but that your study of topics isn't going to get less.
No,
your discipling people not get less. Again, probably the difference between a calling and career.
Yeah,
your career might be over, but probably the calling is not.
I already have to tell myself to slow down in the ideas I have for what I could do at Gospel Chapel going forward, whether that's discipling, further teaching, all that kind of stuff. I'm hopeful that in the next 6-12 months, in 2024, whatever, beyond, that I can be a guest preacher once in a while.
Yeah.
Or,
and maybe you'll find outlets as kind of a layman too.
Yeah.
Like
for
if
sure.
you had never been a pastor, what would be the lanes available to you to still be a part of teaching in the church?
For sure.
Sunday school classes or blog or I don't know.
Yep.
Or
Totally.
one-on-one stuff. Okay, I appreciate you letting me pick your brain.
Yeah, thanks, man.
You got a lot of experience.
Well,
a lot of years behind you already.
Adds up, yeah. I was your first guest?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep.
Looking forward to looking back years from now to go, that was the first one on the podcast.
Yeah, 12 years from now.
There you go.
We'll do another.
Can't wait.